It's a rainy Friday, July 9th, and this is the first time I've recorded an episode for this podcast in quite some time. I've been dealing with an emotional family issue that is really hit close, and it hasn't given me the creative space to kind of say, I'm going to go create a podcast. I find it very difficult sometimes to create content week in and week out that's original, that's exciting, and where I'm not feeling forced. And so when events happened in early June, I really just kind of stepped away. So I look back and I'm like, wow, I haven't done a podcast since June 3rd for this particular podcast. But I wanted to do one today, and I want to talk about something that is really important to me, and it should be important to all of us. And it should be something that we all maybe need to start to think more about, not just broadly and existentially, but really think about our day-to-day and how that's going to change over the next month, over the next year, over the next decade, and really into the latter parts of our lives. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I can say mid, and it's something that I think about a lot, something that is driving the way I'm trying to position myself and my career, both professionally and personally. And so today we're going to talk about climate change. And I'm going to give you my kind of, free-flowing thoughts on the subject. And we're going to look at 5 ways climate change will change our world. Now, most times when I do an episode by myself for a quick pod, I have fairly laid out. People ask me, hey, do you script it out? How do you do it? I will be honest, when I do interviews, I don't really have a script. I have an idea of where I want it to go, but I try not to script it, or nor do I send questions before to any of the people who come on, just because I don't want it to be so square and so boxy. And so how did you feel when you started your company? Oh, well, that's not life. That's not how things happen. That's not what I want it to be. So this pod, while it'll be a quick pod, it will not be as scripted as past ideas. I just have a list of 5 things I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about them. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Once again, this is me getting back into the Wi-Fi and water groove. So I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi and Water. Five ways climate will change our world, or the climate will change our world, or the climate crisis will continue to change the way we live our lives. It's Friday, July 9th. I'm going to record this today, throw in some music in the end, throw in some music in the beginning, and then put it out to the world. Not going to be a lot of dressing on this one. We're just going to throw it out. I want to get an episode out. I miss doing this, but I just haven't had the creative space. But here we are, 5 ways climate will change our world. One of the ways is water, right? It's the name of this podcast. Wi-Fi and water are 2 things that in many parts of the world, you kind of need day in and day out to exist. Water, you need to survive, and Wi-Fi, you need to probably be able to do a lot of what you're doing. Even the farmers in India that I was talking with Parag about on episode 42 or 44, I'm not sure, but I talked about Parag, and Parag was talking about farmers in India being able to basically be more efficient and maximize their yield, but they had to do that leveraging WhatsApp. And so there's really not a place in the planet where people probably on their day-to-day aren't using electricity, technology, and Wi-Fi, or some kind of connectivity and water to really get through the day. You need water to shower, you need water to cook, you need water to clean up, and you probably need Wi-Fi or some kind of connectivity to kind of push through. So number 1 is water. I'm really interested to see how we're going to move forward, because we need it in everything we do. If you just try to go 2 or 3 days without water, well, you won't make it. You may die. But there are going to be massive parts, and I'm going to focus more on the United States right now and then maybe talk about some more global ideas, but there are going to be massive parts of our day-to-day that are going to be completely upended if we only have access to 10 gallons of water per day, or 30 gallons of water per day, or 50 gallons of water per day. And this isn't just like, okay, you probably need to take a shorter shower than maybe you're taking. This is like, maybe there's no more golf. I know, right? For all you golfers out there. Because we, as a society, have decided that water is so important to our well-being that we can no longer go out and irrigate golf courses. Something that's super dear to my heart, and many of you know I run a soccer podcast. Maybe we shouldn't spend all the money and all the water every year, more focused on the water than the money, on keeping up thousands of professional soccer fields, which soak up water and need, tending just like golf courses. Maybe we don't wash our cars anymore. Maybe we don't use sprinklers and overwater our lawns like all I see in the suburbs. It's actually really hard for me when I am out on a run or I'm riding my bike throughout the suburbs of Massachusetts and I just go by countless yards in the suburbs, sprinklers running. It is just one of the most privileged things I've seen. And if you're listening to this and you're like, God, this guy's ranting, well, you're totally right. I am ranting. I'm on a rant. I'm in my backswing. You're listening to the pod. You can fast forward if you don't want to hear this. But I just think our use of water, we're going to have to engage with it, and it's going to affect every single element of our lives. Like in the future, will there be Olympic swimming, or will it be open sea swimming? These are all questions that I don't know, but it's like when I look at the Tokyo Olympics and look at the Summer Olympics, like, are we going to have water polo? Or are we going to have swimming? Are we going to have lawns? Can we play golf? Can we go out and irrigate professional soccer fields? All of these things. Can we waste the water that we currently use at car washes? Do we really need to wash our cars? Are people that impressed? You can't just wait for a rain? And on a final thought on this, I think the future, my children will probably fight wars for water, whereas when I was 18, we basically went into Iraq, for a lack of better terms, over oil. So we're going to be fighting wars over water and not oil. So think about in your day-to-day what that looks like now. Number 2 is internally displaced people. I talked in an episode in the past about the idea that the UN has said 50 million people annually are going to be displaced by by changes in the climate, by the climate crisis. And so how does that affect us? Eventually, people in Texas, the Gulf, so Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, they're all going to need to relocate. And this isn't going to happen in 100 years. No, this is going to happen, and it's already happening, so probably on some small level. But it's going to be growing greater over the next 10 to 20 years. And by 2040, I don't really think that there are going to be a lot of people left living in places where you can't basically insure your homes against hurricanes or flooding or any of these things. If you can't insure an asset like a house, it's not worth anything. If you have a Lamborghini but you can't insure it, you're probably not going to drive it. Similarly, if you have a house and you can't insure it against things that are very likely to happen, you're not going to live there. Because if you can't get claims, if you can't get your damages, if you can't insure an asset and get that money back if it were to be damaged, it's no longer livable. So mass migration of people both globally and internally, the IDP, the idea of the internally displaced people, I think over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see a lot more of those people move north. If you're thinking about the United States, they're going to move more northern, and just around the world, people are going to be pulled towards places that are going to be probably away from the ocean as sea levels continue to rise and we start to see hurricane season extend more. And this is also going to be molded by drought and forest fires. If we're just thinking about the United States, we have forest fires in the West Coast. We're going to have drought in the Midwest. We're going to have hurricanes that are going to affect the South and up even to the Northeast. Movement of people is going to happen. How will that affect you? Are you living in a place currently right now that FEMA says, hey, you're in the eye of hurricanes as water levels continue to rise globally? How will that affect people? And people are also going to be drawn globally, as they always have been, towards new opportunities. Central Americans are going to continue to migrate through Mexico up to the southern border if situations continue in their home countries that leave people in desperate situations. So IDP, mass migration, this is also something I think people need to think about. Is your house located very close to the ocean? What types of insurance do you have? And that rolls into number 3, which is real estate evolutions. The real estate market is going to have a complete evolution over the next 10 to 20 years. A lot of this has to do with tech on the way that we buy and sell real estate, but if we focus strictly on climate change, so much of our real estate in this country, the most expensive real estate, is right by the water. San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Miami, Philadelphia, DC, New York. These are all by large bodies of water or close enough that if there were to be a hurricane, it could be affected. Boston as well. Obviously, I need to add in Boston. And as the real estate becomes uninsurable that's close to the water, it will have a rippling effect back inland, which will lower housing prices. And because so many people in this country's wealth is tied to their home values, it will be a serious problem. I just think you should think about where your home is located now and what happens if there's a hurricane. I know where my parents live and where I currently live in Salem. I'm a quarter mile away from the ocean. I rent here, my parents own their home, and I've been speaking with my father for years about the fact that, hey, if there's a hurricane, what's going to happen? So real estate upending, being affected by climate change, I think that's another thing people should think about. Number 4 is something that I heard in a documentary, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's basically the idea that as the fossil fuel industry, actually, no, this was the documentary done by Michael Moore, and it's on YouTube, and it's called The Planet of Humans, The Human Planet. Yeah, so clearly I did not think this one out, so I'm going to look it up right now. So I'm on YouTube, and I'm going to look it up. Give me 1 second here. I think it's called The Planet of Humans, and yeah, it's called The Planet of the Humans. And if you search it, it has 11 million views. And it's Michael Moore documentary about, yes, we need to get off fossil fuels and we need to go into, quote, green or renewable energies. But the difficulty we're going to have to do that and how in order to get off fossil fuels, we kind of need to get into fossil fuels, because in order to make solar panels, in order to make windmills, in order to make anything that has to do with geothermal, all of this, we actually need to use fossil fuels to make. So check that out. But I believe it's in this documentary where they drop the idea that, and this is number 4, $100 trillion of assets. The fossil fuel industry globally basically has about $100 trillion of assets. Now, this is pipelines, this is refining stations, this is any material, any hard material that they would consider an asset that they currently use to prop up and keep the fossil fuel industry running, which is how I'm probably able to record this and put this out to the world. We're all still very much on fossil fuels. Even though the house I live in does have solar panels, maybe this is a little offset. Point being, we have $100 trillion in assets, which when we finally go all electric and we finally go solar and we finally go all geothermal and we use wind and we use all these other things that we kind of have at our disposal, that $100 trillion of asset sell-off is going to affect the financial market. It's going to make the 2008 financial crisis, or even what we've had in this pandemic as far as the financial crisis, look like a blip, because it's going to be such a transfer of wealth. And if you take $100 trillion out of the global economy, the butterfly effect will be massive. And that's something we're also going to have to deal with as we start to find more renewable, more planet-friendly ways to essentially transition the way that we create, store, and consume energy. And finally, number 5 is food production. For a long time, there's been this conversation about, well, we need to eat local, and that's what you should do. I think in the future, due to the increasing change in temperatures, the volatility of our climate, hurricanes, forest fires, drought, everything, we're no longer going to be able to rely on our supermarkets at some level, maybe throughout the entire year, to provide us with, and I'm speaking once again, this is a strictly United States view on this. And I want to backtrack a little bit. One of the things a college professor once said, it was a brilliant idea. She said by Teresa Delphine. Teresa, if you're listening to this, she said, I define the first world being any place where you can go into the supermarket and find produce out of season, find fruit and vegetables from other parts of the world that don't grow where you currently are, but that you have access to. And I think in the future, if that's how we define the quote first world, I think the United States especially is going to evolve more into a second or third world just because we're not going to be able to have access to the fruits and vegetables from other countries, from other parts, even within our own country, year-round, due to the volatility of climate, due to supply chain disruptions, from a pandemic, from war, from anything under the sun. There's so many things that can happen, and we've kind of been tested a little bit. The pandemic was like a pop quiz to see how we would do, and I think we actually did fairly well. Once again, I was only in between Colombia and the United States throughout the pandemic, and from what I've seen, food production and supply chains haven't been too disrupted, but I do think in the future we are going to find a place, and Teresa would maybe agree with me, maybe not, where you're not going to be able to walk into your supermarket in Massachusetts, as I've done, and go get clementines in the middle of January. It's 15 degrees outside and I can go get a tropical fruit. I can go in and get some avocados from Mexico. I can get clementines from Florida. I can get something from southern Italy. I can get quinoa from the Altiplano, Peru, Bolivia. We're not going to be able to do that. So in the future, this whole idea from farm to fork, I think will be replaced by hyper-local understandings of making your own crops. And just like we've seen people in the United States now look for homes that have home offices, I think an idea of having your own greenhouse, either on your premises that's like in the back that's its actually own standalone greenhouse, or the kind of bubble out windows that you'll see on some buildings, I think that's our future. I think we're going to all need to be able to create our own produce on some level and be able to basically have access to food in the event that supply chains are ruined due to a holy host of future complications that the world is going to face. And yeah, so there's my 5 ways climate will change the world. I think these are the things I think about when I'm out on a run or I'm on my bike. These are the things I think about. I see a sprinkler in someone's yard. I'm like, wow. I think about mass migration and how we as humans need to be more compassionate and empathetic to people who are moving. Like, no one wants to leave their home. I think that's one of the things that I've always wanted to stress to anyone who's like anti-immigrant. So like, no one wants to leave their neighborhood. No one wants to leave where they go get their haircut or where they go to church or their favorite restaurant. No one wants to leave that, okay? But sometimes people have to. Sometimes there are situations that force people to leave where they are. Real estate, I was raised in a coastal suburb of Massachusetts, and when I run, I'm so privileged enough to run by the water, and it's beautiful, and it's also cooler. So even if I run on a 90-degree day, when I go by the water, it's like a natural AC. I think about real estate. I see these houses that are basically on a cliff, and I wonder what's going to happen. The fossil fuel thing, the $100 trillion of assets, that will shake the market. That will forever change humanity because it's going to be this massive transfer of wealth. Like I said, it could be a shift in wealth greater than we even saw in the pandemic, where Jeff Bezos basically doubled his net worth. People in the fossil fuel industry who sell those are going to be on another echelon of wealth when that happens. And finally, food production. I think, and I've always felt this way ever since Teresa said that in college, was essentially if you have access to all the produce, or if you can go into your supermarket and find something that would be off season that doesn't grow there, then you're living in a very privileged situation. You could call it a first world situation, just a privileged situation. And those are the things I think we're all going to have to engage with a little more. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Wifi Water Podcast. Reach out, let me know your thoughts. I plan on expanding on all 5 of these ideas with a little bit harder numbers where I'm not looking up on YouTube the name of the documentary. Once again, it was The Planet of the Humans by Michael Moore. Reach out. I love hearing from people, and I'll be back soon. But like I said, I'm going to dive deeper on all 5 of these ideas because I do think that they really deserve their own episode. And we'll see everyone next time. Thanks.